Welcome to the 8th and final video in our polar graphing series, Everything Else. Here's an example of what I would say qualifies as everything else. When I'm given an equation to graph in polar form, sometimes I stop and think, is it a limison? Does the equation match that format? Well, almost, but limisons specifically always have an argument of theta in their sines and cosines. You don't have multiples of theta like 2 theta or 3 theta. So it isn't a limison. It's clearly not a circle by the format of the equation. It also doesn't match the format of a rose, nor a lemniscate. So what is it? Well, it's something else. And we can graph just about anything else in polar form as long as we stick to our basic principles, asking what changes in theta will affect changes in r. In this particular case, I'm going to go in 45 degree or pi over 4 increments as I have in previous problems where 2 theta was my trigonometry argument. And I could make a table, plug in all these values. These are the responses, by the way. I did not show any algebra here whatsoever, but these are things you could work out if you needed to. And then, as we have done in almost every video in the series, you could then find the behavior of r during each of these intervals of theta, in this case intervals of 45 degrees. And then we could ask the same question we always do: how is this going to look on a graph? Let's take a look at that now. So let's look at this graph starting in the first quadrant. In the first quadrant, we'll notice that r goes from 3 to 9 and then from 9 back to 3. Watch as that happens. Here's the radius going from 3 to 9 and from 9 back to 3. That completes our first quadrant. Now notice in the second quadrant, you can tell by looking at the table, that r values are going to go from 3 to -3 and then from -3 back to 3. Well, that means they're going to have to go through 0 twice. So let's take the first half of the second quadrant, where r goes from 3 to -3. Here's r going from 3 to 0, and then r going from 0 to -3. Now for the second half of the second quadrant, you'll notice by looking at the table, r goes from -3 back to +3. Let's break that into two parts. Here's r going from -3 to 0, and then from 0 to +3. Went a little past it there. As we get into the third quadrant, you'll notice at the table that r goes from 3 to 9 and back to 3. So here it's going from 3 to 9 and then back to 3. Stopped a little soon there. And in the last quadrant, you'll notice it goes from 3 to -3, and then from -3 through 0 and back to 3 again. And that concludes the 6th of 8 lessons.